Hi, Team Flyer. How are you? We are back with this very Go to Fly special event this month. We have Bryana Salaz with us. We had her last week. We're going to have her next week. And guess what? We're going to have her the week after that. It's the whole month
Taking
of.
over.
She's taking over. Exactly. There she is again. She's taking over our feed 100%, and we cannot love her anymore, basically. Because holy moly, the story she has, the story you got to tell us, because they already know that you're here with me already. The stories that you tell us, that you want to tell us, the message behind everything is so freaking inspiring, and it's so real, and it's so raw, and it's so needed. So thank you very much again for joining in another Wednesday, and let's get to it. So before we dive in, as always, we have you're from Team Kaylie.
Yeah.
We are, like we said, we are behind the scenes. We talk about eating disorders, about addiction, about toxic vibes, and LGTB. For those who don't know you yet, just in case, tell us a little bit about what you do. It's like a show host, like a game show host. You know what I mean? Tell us what you do.
Well,
Come on down.
Hi, I'm a singer. No, singer, actress, entertainer. I I always laugh when I say singer because I literally have not released a goddamn thing. But singing is actually what brought me to LA. A lot of people don't know that. I wouldn't be in LA. Well, maybe, who knows? But I came to LA because of music, and with how my stars aligned, I've just had acting going for me. So been following that momentum, and maybe one day I'll release a song. Who knows? But
So that's the thing. You got to give yourself more credit. You are a singer. You have sung before when like a lot of audiences, including you were on The Voice. I mean,
crazy
come
stuff.
on.
Yeah.
She was also on The Voice. Most of her following knows you through Team Kaylie, obviously so, from Netflix.
Yes,
the 3-parter show. And that's pretty much it. And if you want to know more, it's Bryana Salaz. That's pretty much, there you go, and then go back and listen to the first episode. And if you want more, go back to Latina, which she's also there, talking about more issues.
Everywhere.
Exactly. This is what best friends do. This is the real thing. You know what I mean? It's like, of course, let's talk. And like we said, I mean, we talk for hours on end. So I feel like right now, this is just like a walk in the park for us.
Yeah, this is like the formality.
Yeah, there's like, this is like F being formal. You just look her up. It's fine. Anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, just go back and listen to the other ones. It's all good.
Perfect. That's my favorite intro I've ever had in the world.
Yes.
Thank you for not making this awkward.
No, of course not. I mean, and we're really real here. Like if you hear some of the episodes, I get teary-eyed. You got teary-eyed in the previous episode. So I feel like it's already kind of like that. What you see, what you get. Let's just roll with the punches.
Absolutely. And if you could see me right now, you'd see that I am in literally a sweatsuit. So.
And you're like, oh my God, lucky her. How come she's not melting? And I'm melting over here. AC versus non-AC kind of life.
I've lived in both. I understand what you're going through.
I know. I know, but still, just get all comfy, people. Today we're talking about another deep subject, even though we're laughing and whatnot. We will dive into a deep subject of addiction.
Yeah.
We really hope you did enjoy the first episode. We love hearing your comments and thoughts and DMs and all the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things and all the love that you've given us. So let's dive in. Obviously, once again, this topic ties in with last week's and all month long because it's your continuous journey and how your inner story unfolded. So last week when we talked about eating disorder, this all led up to today's with addiction.
Yes.
What were you addicted to, my love?
Oh God. To just make it simple, alcohol and weed, marijuana. And like I said in the last episode, it's something that I'm just naturally going to touch on every week is just anxiety and depression because those were two very present things in my life that were really brought to another level that definitely played a huge part in my addictions. Again, the not eating, which I talked about last week, really triggered a hell of a lot of anxiety, just the night sweats, the panic attacks, all of that stuff. And Then I discovered, I don't want to say I discovered weed then, because that was, I've genuinely, I smoked marijuana for, God, 2 years, like every single day, daily, maybe. And something that I never would have ever considered an addiction, because, and something I hear all the time is, you can't get addicted to weed. You can't get addicted to weed. You can't get addicted to weed. It's a plant, And so that's something that I ran with. But because during those times I wasn't in the worst mental place ever, it wasn't something that I used as like a coping mechanism. And as someone who does struggle with anxiety and has since I was about in middle school is when it started for me. I never abused weed until around this time. And yeah, it was bad, because it went from, okay, I'm just like smoking with my friends on an off day, blah, 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 to I am now having a collection of bongs in my apartment. I'm smoking by myself, ripping bongs, oh God, every day. And the amount of money I have spent on that is ridiculous. Same thing with drinking. It went from like a fun social thing to, I'm sad, how can I not be sad? And these were the things that I turned to rather than getting help. Because again, like I touched on last week, I didn't want to get help. I didn't want to get better, because if I got better, then that means I would not be, as skinny as I was. And so I turned to really, really unhealthy habits. I guess, just diving into it, it started like, really when the eating disorder started, when it really kicked into high gear. Because it was like, well, how do I get through the day? That was like my biggest thing. So I, first and foremost, want to make it very clear, I take my job very seriously. I am very professional. I really hold myself to that. And that's not in a cocky way or anything. I just really take what I do seriously. I take the art seriously, the craft seriously, no matter how low I am. So I never drank on set. I never smoked on set. I was, during rehearsals, I also worked with kids, which I take very seriously. And I would not feel right if I was, high around my kids, or if I was drunk around my kids. And that's not something that I wanted it's not a reputation I wanted to have. And so I did take that very seriously. However, it was like, again, behind the scenes in the dark, what happened when I was by myself. And so it started really with, again, the mentality of how can I just get through the day, because getting through the day right now is the hardest thing that I've ever done. And when I had rehearsals and filming, it was easy because I'm working literally nonstop. So it's easy to distract myself. It's easy to get into that, not worry about that stuff. It was when I go home, is when I'm by myself and I don't have anyone to entertain. I don't have anyone to distract me from what I'm going through. And so I always had multiple bottles of Tito's in my freezer, and I always had weed. Those were two things that I never went without. It was literally like, when you're driving, I have this thing of like, I hate when my gas tank gets below half a tank because I just don't want to risk it. That was pretty much where I was. If half a bottle was gone, I'd go ahead and get another one. And if half my weed was gone, I'd go ahead and order more. And it became this cycle of when I got home, for me, weed was my biggest coping mechanism when I was alone, because it made me tired. It made me disassociate. And as someone who was dealing with absolute peak crazy anxiety every single day on set, the the calm was going home and smoking, because it was at a point too where I realized, hey, I'm not having a panic attack when I'm high. And it got to a point where I wasn't even getting high because I smoked so much, that it was literally just disassociating and going into another place and having this weird, just cloudy feeling over me, but like not feeling anxious. And so to me, my what's the word, I guess, like what allowed me to do it was the fact that like I was like, oh well, I'm not anxious now, this is helping my anxiety, so this isn't bad for me. What I didn't realize was that weed is not a depressant, and I'm not here to say that weed is the worst thing for you, you shouldn't smoke, you know, like I get it, do you, but just know that you can get addicted, and you can get addicted to the feeling of being disassociated, especially when you're in that low place. And that's what I was doing. I didn't want to feel sad. I didn't want to feel anxious. So I abused marijuana and allowed myself to just kind of disappear. And I would smoke myself to sleep. I couldn't sleep without weed. I would keep my bong by my bed. If I woke up in the middle of the night, always drenched in sweat, I'd take a hit and then go back to sleep. It was just like this cycle of that, and that's literally how I dealt with being alone. And with drinking, that just became kind of a thing where I had this thing for about half of the show where I wouldn't drink during the weekdays. I'd only drink on the weekends because I wanted to be responsible. And partying became a big part of my life, just as far as going to any party I could, so I could just socialize and small talk with people who I literally couldn't give two shits about and who couldn't give two shits about me, and just being drunk and getting that weird kind of social validation from everybody else, and getting that weird, I mean, going out was validation for me, because every time I went out, people are saying I've lost so much weight and I look amazing. And when you're not eating, you get drunk really fast. You get alcohol poisoning. You get all the gross things that alcohol does to you. When you abuse it, it's sad. It's sad when I look back and I see like, just like, I can't believe that I even acted like that or thought that was okay. And it got bad. It really was. I would say that alcohol and weed were my best friends during that time. It was like, that's what it was one of those like, well, those can't disappoint me. Like I literally, in one of the songs I wrote something where like, there was a strain, and I wrote that strain never disappointed me. Like, you know, because people always disappoint, people always leave you, but alcohol and weed are always there. They're always accessible, and they're never going to judge you. They just take away pain temporarily. And that became like my motto. And yeah, it was not a fun time, I can tell you that.
Much like we did in the previous episode, it's a lot to unpack, of course. I always say, like I said previously, I already know you. We already talked about this before, so I am already reacting to stuff that I already knew. And I'm always going to tell you the same thing because I know you. I'm super proud of who you are today. And once again, we'll get into like as always the end of the episode, but I always have to tell you because I feel like that's one of our biggest motivators as well, that people who know you like, okay, you went through that, look at you now. Mm-hmm. And it's a hard, long battle. And the other disclaimer is like, it doesn't matter how long you're addicted to something. Once you're addicted, even it could be for a month or 6 months or 60 years, it still counts, of course. Because like you said before with our previous episode on eating disorder, it's a mental illness at the end of the day. Yes. And that's what people have to comprehend. So you did tell us a whole lot. You told us as well that even though it went to like full gear, basically, of course, Team Kaylie, that's what we're going to talk about in a quick second, yes. That behind the scenes, it did start about 2 years.
Yeah, and it was, I think because, you know, it was something that I started off doing very rarely, very occasionally, especially because at the time I lived at home, you know, so I come from a very, you know, strict family, you know, and so like, just like never allowed anything, like in that sense. And so it was very rare that I did that. And it wasn't until I moved out and started, you know, doing that more often, and then it became a thing. And then I realized that, oh, I kind of always have weed in the house. It's weird. But I never had, and this, you know, again, will bleed into next week. I never had people in my life who brought it to my attention. I never had anybody who was like, hey dude, like you are smoking a lot. So I was surrounded by people who thought it was the sickest thing that I was like a pothead, who thought it was like super cool that like, you know, I could outsmoke them, you know, things like that. And that was like almost like, again, and something that, you know, I've learned too is that I struggled a lot with validation. Like I fed off of validation, and I realized that started in high school. I always needed validation. And so like being the cool pothead girl who like, oh, like I can't outsmoke Bree. I've never seen someone smoke that much. Like, you know, to me, I was like, whoa, I'm cool. You know, like, oh, I'm the cool girl, like who can do that, who can hang, you know, and I liked that. Like I fed off of that. No matter how disassociated I was, you couldn't tell me that I wouldn't believe you. And I think that's the thing with addiction is that you don't know you're addicted. There's always an excuse for it. It's you. So you don't realize how different of a person that you become. And that was a really big thing for me that honestly, I didn't realize till about a month and a half ago. And it was something that I wish I would have been surrounded by people. But when you're addicted to something, you're gonna want to be around and gravitate towards people who aren't telling you it's an addiction, who are encouraging it. And so that's exactly what I did. And in fact, there were a few people in my past who did talk to me about it, and they're no longer in my life. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, you think that I'm doing that, like you don't want me to smoke. Okay, then well, that's a part of who I am, and that's, you know, it's a part of me. Like I literally like was like, I'm not Bree without being a smoker. And I talk more about smoking right now just because that's something that, again, I did daily for a long time. I was never the person who drank every day. I was the person who smoked every day. And I was in a bad situation with an old roommate, where, again, there was just no boundaries or anything, and no sense of like caring, in the sense of nothing was ever brought to my attention. Everything was just encouraged. And so when Team Kaylie started happening, and I realized that it was switching from validation, being cool girl, you know, being addicted, to this is literally my coping mechanism. This is literally how I feel like I have to get through my day. That was a really big wake-up call for me. And again, but it wasn't something, and that's what's crazy about this whole experience, is I was very self-aware of everything that I was doing. And yet there was not anything in the world that could change it for me. There was not any comments. I mean, I'll tell it, like having your parents walk into your freaking apartment and your place just reeks of weed and there's a bong in the corner and you tried to hide it, and you know, like it's just it's sad. It's humiliating. It really is. Like I don't want my parents seeing that. Like I don't want them to know that that's what's happening, you know. And so yeah, it started a while ago and manifested into the beast that it was during
Team Kaylie. Yeah. Exactly. So, all right. So before we continue, give us a quick refresher on how Set Life goes.
Set Life, absolutely insane. Being the only principal who's over 18 and a cast of kids. Again, very mentally draining. A lot of energy being used throughout the day, and never working less than 9 hours, and feeling really lucky if I got to leave at 9 hours. An easy day for me was working 14 hours and having like a 2-hour break in between, because at least I got to like recharge in those 2 hours. So, you know, but it was, yeah.
Exactly. So like we always want to make like a note for our followers and fans and whatnot to see the little behind the scenes of that as well, because on one hand, it's probably very interesting how that set life works, of course, because as you mentioned in the first episode, you know, you did all 3 parts in 8 months.
Yes.
And it's kind of, you know, the 20 episodes are kind of quote unquote back to back for all of you, of course. So that's also important because that's when you kind of see that, you know, you're dealing with very long schedules for 8 months in a row, of course. And this is like a Monday to Sunday thing. It could be long shoots, night shoots, and whatnot. And like you said, you get used in the you get used in many senses, but also one of the senses that because you're somebody else's character, if that makes any sense. So you have to go to, you know, get makeup done again and retouch an outfit or change it again. And then, oh my God, you have to do that. The first scene that you did at the beginning of the day to do it again. And
oh yeah, like you never film anything in order. I mean, I'm wearing the most ridiculous over extra outfits in the world. So and like you know, the funnest thing about kids TV is that you do get to do like really crazy stuff and like, but a lot of it requires a lot of changes and all this shit. So it's like literally just, it's exhausting just going from set to my dressing room at least 30 times a day, like to change. And you're like, you only have 5 minutes. Okay, go. And you're in extensions, full face of makeup. You're changing into a different costume. You're in 6-inch heels. You're like, it's just like all this stuff that plays a part in it that you don't really think about.
Exactly. This is why I also mentioned this in behind the scenes side, because like, this is what happens. You don't have half an hour to change your next outfit. It's usually 5 minutes to go. And then your character, we've talked about it really quickly in the first episode, but we talked about how, you know, extra she is basically.
Oh my God, she's so extra. Like literally when I tell you the extensions itself were probably 5 pounds on my head every single day. And I was just like, I have to feel like a human at some point, but I felt like a little, you know, doll, and it was so fun. Like it really was an awesome, fun experience in that sense. But again, when you're not eating and you're struggling mentally really hard, it goes from fun to work, and
exactly.
and that was like my biggest fear, and it came true.
And what you said really quickly once more, because it's a kids show, you do a lot of not only stunts because you have stunt doubles maybe and whatnot, but you do a lot of like crazy scenes. It's and like I've seen Team Kaylie, and there's scenes that, you know.
The thing is too, I love, you know, and that's why this is behind the scenes stuff, because what you see on camera is very real as far as the stunts. Of course, the big stunts, I did have a stunt double, but I love my job. I love what I do, and I want to throw myself in 110%. So the wrestling episode, only one of those stunts is a stunt double for liability. But every time they wanted to put the stunt double in, I was like, no, I'm going to do it. Like, I love physical comedy. This is why I love doing kids TV, because I love physical comedy. I love the energy, and I know I have it. So, you know, I did throw myself in 110%, and it's very physically crazy, but it was awesome at the end of the day, doing all those stunts and stuff. So very thankful for that. But yeah, you know, when you're not taking care of yourself, it's a little different.
It's a little different. That's why we're saying, you know, like it's not as easy as it looks. And there's many of you out there who are very young, and we're very thankful that you are listening, of course. But that you also see that behind the scenes, so we know how interested you are in knowing little sneak peeks like that. But you guys can see a little bit more of that perspective as well of what goes on and how fast paced it is and whatnot.
Oh my God.
So
ridiculous.
When did you start, now that we know a little bit more about set life, and we're going to talk more behind the scenes about set life in this particular case was addiction, when did you notice it started becoming bigger and more serious thing, this addiction? Like, was it right at the start of Team Kaylie, or is it like a certain point that happened?
You know, I can't name a specific moment, like, you know, with the eating disorder. Like, obviously I know what triggered that. I know when it happened, blah, blah, blah. With this, I feel like, and I don't know what the case is for most people with addiction, I feel like addiction is something that creeps up on you because it doesn't always begin as an addiction. Because like I said, weed is not it's not like something, it's not an addictive drug, you know, it's, but it's something that you get addicted to depending on how you're using it and everything. And so when you're denying that it's addicting, then when it starts becoming a daily thing, and then when it starts becoming a daily thing and you're doing it by yourself and you're realizing, for me, when I realized it was getting really bad was when I started bringing a wax pen to set. And again, I never got high on set, never, because I just hold myself to still at least a certain standard when, doing. And I had one though, so that I could go, and it got to a point where I've literally Ubered to where I lived 5 minutes from my job. I could drive if I wanted to, but I Ubered because after rehearsals, I just wanted to go to my dressing room. And the first thing I needed to do was take a puff so that my anxiety could just chill out for a second. And so when that started happening, I remember one of my older castmates who was a guest star and ended up becoming like literally one of my best friends just because he saved my life so many times. And him being like, dude, you brought it to set, like, because I always told him, like, don't worry, I'm never gonna bring this shit to set, never. And that's when I was like, oh shit, damn, I'm at the point where I'm bringing this pen to set, and even though I'm not using it, like, it's still here. It's still so in control of my life that I can't leave it at home now. Like, it needs to be accessible to me. And then a big one, I mean, there's a few incidences, but a huge one for me that happened was, I went to a party one night, and luckily the next morning was just a table read and a rehearsal. So table reads are when you sit down with the cast and all of production is in the room, all the writers are in the room, the director, everybody. You're filming the table read. The Netflix executives are there, literally the heads of Netflix are there, and you read the script out loud so they can hear what it sounds like from the characters, and they can give notes and go rewrite the script because you get a new script every single night with rewrites. And I remember I went to a party one night, and I vividly remember telling myself, okay, you cannot get too drunk, you cannot go too hard because you have a table read at 7:30 a.m. And famous last words, I'm not going to black out. My famous last words during that time. And next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. I'm at IHOP. I'm devouring pancakes because I'm just absolutely wasted. Go to bed, go home, pass out, wake up, and I'm like, I remember being like, whoa, I'm like alive. Like, I feel great. I'm good. I'm chilling. I'm like ready for the day. And I went to go take a bath, was starting to feel really hungover. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't feel good. I just woke up still drunk. That's how drunk I was, because I blacked out. And blacking out was a thing for me. Like, I'm not talking just being really wasted. I'm talking like literally like going, like I can't remember certain parts of the party because I was so drunk. And so when I was in my bathtub and I realized, holy fuck, I'm still drunk and I have work in an hour and a half. And so I went to set early because I had an early wardrobe that day because, again, my wardrobe was always being moved around because kids had to be out at a certain time. And I was in wardrobe and I was told her, and then my drunk had completely gone away and I was just hung over. And when you don't eat and you're drinking, it is quite literally the worst combination of all time because you have nothing to absorb the alcohol. So it's just all sitting there in your stomach and you can't get rid of it. And that was genuinely the only time like I made myself throw up, not because I was getting rid of food, but because I was like, I need to get rid of the alcohol in my system. And I remember waiting for my wardrobe lady to come and do, my outfits and everything. And I literally was just hanging over the chair. Like I was sitting on the floor with my head on the chair and I was like, I can't do wardrobe. Like I can't do this right now. And she is an angel. Again, she is one of the ones who was really looking out for me. And she walked me to my dressing room and was like, it's okay. We don't have to do wardrobe today. We can do it on Monday. And she brought me a bagel. She brought me, toast because bread is like, just everyone knows, like bread is what you have when you're hungover. And I couldn't keep anything down. and I had a table read now in 30 minutes. And so I'm freaking out because, again, that was when I was like, I am literally becoming the freaking person that I said I would never, ever be on set, no matter how, just because I didn't drink on set, the aftermath of what I did the night before was bleeding into my set life, was bleeding into my work and my career. And that is everything that I completely go against. Like, I totally stand against, you know? And so I'm sitting there hunched over the toilet, can't keep down my bagel, can't keep down, you know, anything. And for the first time, I want to keep it down because I want to be able to go to my table read. I can barely walk from the toilet to my couch in my dressing room, to the point where I was so sick that I called my dad, like breaking down, like mentally breaking down. And I was like, please just come to set. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I am freaking out. Like, I'm like blacked out last night. And this is my first time telling my parents I've ever blacked out. And, you know, I'm not the type of kid who calls my parents when they're drunk or texts them drunk messages or lets them see me drinking ever. So for me to call my dad and be like, I blacked out last night and I'm literally so hungover, I don't know what to do because I have a table read in 30 minutes, was easily one of the hardest phone calls I've had. To the point where I called an outside doctor outside of Netflix and had to have someone come and attach an IV to my arm, like a full-blown IV setup, because they have, you know, certain things. And there's the hungover IV, but then I had to get literal medication because I had alcohol poisoning. I haven't been eating. I don't have any nutrients in my system. So it was more than just hungover. I was like, my organs were literally crying for help. And so I'm sitting there with an IV attached to my arm, and they're like, 10 minutes table read. And the thing is that they said I don't have to do the table read, but because I'm just the type of person who is like, no, this is my job. I don't care. I put myself in this position. I told myself I never would. I need to go do this table read. I kid you not. I walked into a table read. I literally told the nurse or the doctor who was giving me my IV, I was like, if anyone asks you, I had food poisoning because I was traveling that week. And I was like, I got food poisoning from the airport. That's it. I didn't drink. It has nothing to do with that. And you're giving me the vitamins that I need because of food poisoning. And I had to sit down and do a table read. And I literally felt like the biggest piece of shit because people are praising me and applauding me because they're like, wow, like even like though she got food poisoning, you know, she's working so hard to like, she still shows up no matter what. Like, she's not making excuses. And, you know, although that is very true about me and my work, it wasn't true that day. And I felt so ashamed for just being like, oh, thank you, like I'm trying. And I actually had to leave in the middle of the table read. I couldn't finish the table read. Someone else had to read my lines because I had to go throw up. I couldn't sit there without feeling super nauseous because reading my lines as Kaylie was taking too much energy out of me. I couldn't even like do my regular high-pitched voice. And that was genuinely, I had to go home. I went home with my parents that weekend because luckily it was the weekend. And that was like a huge, huge turning point for me as far as, oh my God, this is a problem. I can't be doing this. Like, I can't work like this. And so to be that person that I never wanted to be, even if it was for that day, like, was just the worst feeling in the world. And I wish I could say that I didn't drink after that, but I relied on alcohol for my dopamine and my serotonin. So, you know, it wasn't, I can just say, you know, it wasn't the last time. It was the last time as far as like showing up with an IV attached to my arm, but was not the last time that I was hungover on set. And being hungover on set was just the worst feeling in the world. It was absolutely horrible. And it's something I really do regret, but I learned. So, yeah.
Well, as always, what do we say after all this? Well, thank you very much for opening up. Of course, I know every single conversation that we're going to have this month, that we're having this month, is because you offered, because you were like, hey, yeah, I love what your podcast is all about. I love what your movement's all about. I wanted a platform, and here we are, as you already explained in the first episode. And I'm very thankful for you to share that, because I know how difficult it is, but it's also a humongous eye-opener that not everything is as it seems.
Yeah.
I feel like people need to comprehend that you are also humans. You're also peoples. You're
Yeah.
human beings, essentially. You're not just a pretty face slash celebrity slash the girl from that TV show, basically, you know?
Yeah.
You also go through stuff
Absolutely.
internally and through family, without family, just in general. And the fact that you recognized that you did all this, that you did become that person that
Yeah.
you never wanted to become, you were there, basically, that definitely was a very much a rude awakening.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's
we're
scary. It's scary. Like, you know, I even had my parents, just talking to them about this and like doing the podcast even and talking to different people about it. Like, it's scary putting these stories out here because essentially I'm risking, you know, someone in the business, like listening to this, you know, because I have people who follow me from Team Kaylie. Like, I have, you know, the writers or the production people or the Netflix executives who follow me. And, you know, like I said, overall, I made it my job to make it the easiest set that I could. And I think that I did a good job of that. And I put myself under the fire for it. I put myself through a lot of shit for it, but that was what I wanted to do. So to come out and really talk about what I was going through is scary because it does risk, like, you know, well, maybe someone doesn't want to work with her because, oh, well, maybe we don't want to work with her because it sounds like she's unstable on set. And I realize that, like, that's a risk that I'm willing to go through right, because it's more important for me to be honest. And, you know, if I can't put that out there and show what I've learned from it, then, you know, I think suppressing it, I think not talking about it is what will trigger something else. For me, being honest and vulnerable about this experience is what allows me to face it and relive it in a way that's positive, in a way of looking at it like, well, I've come out of that and I won't let myself get there again, versus like, oh, well, maybe if I don't talk about it, it will go
oh,
away.
exactly, that's the thing. I feel like that's the most beautiful part. Sadly, I mean, we did talk a lot about the industry last episode when it comes to like eating disorders and how common it is and things like that. And knowing you once again personally, that was one of the questions that we brought up before we started filming or recording, because they're like, well, you know, this is also your business. This is
Mm-hmm.
what you're meant to do. You love acting, and we know how the industry works, of course. However, the fact that you are sitting here comfortable as heck, of course, expressing these stories and these feelings is a lot about you, a lot about your message and who you want to be and what kind of role model you are. Because the fact that, yes, that time and like the 2 times on set that you were quote unquote off the rails, if you want to put it that way,
Yeah.
woke you up, you were
Mm-hmm.
really respectful the rest of the times. You were really like, if I had to be there, I will be there. If you know, you, like you keep saying, you work with your kids, you want to be a good role model for them. So I feel like it shows a lot more strength, and it should, without a doubt.
Yeah, because like I said, this behind the scenes for me is just all of my struggles and all of my internal battles that no one on set had to see or deal with. For They might have seen some results and they might have seen a few crazy moments with my panic attacks here and there, they, you know, things like that, but they, overall, it was an internal battle, it was an internal struggle, and it was something that I dealt with when set was done, when set was over, when it was 5 o'clock. You know, it was me versus me and me versus my brain. It wasn't.
Exactly. And that's something that's super important, you know, that people need to understand. It's behind the scenes from Team Kaylie, but it's nothing to do with Team Kaylie directly. In this particular case, it's just you and your personal demons. And for people to see, like, once again, not everything is as it seems. Because you do meet Kaylie, and you are one heck of a good actress, without a doubt, because you can't tell that you're going through all these things. Because I sat down and watched Team Kaylie way before, you know, and you just seem happy-go-lucky, kind of like the character, which is great at the end of the day, because that means, you know, you are a good actress, of course, and you are able to pull it off, and you're like, okay.
Thank
You know, like, let's do this. And Kaylie is a lot. Kaylie is a really big character to play because she is a lot all the time, of course,
Oh,
all the time. I know you want to touch up the point of drugs as well.
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, please.
You know, is just again, I think it's something that's super normalized here. I don't say here, I think just in every, and that's what I'm learning too every day, is that in every industry, not just the entertainment industry, in every industry, there's just so many things that are normalized that, you know, are not healthy or not good. And for me, like a big one was the party scene here. It, you know, if you weren't at the parties, then it was like, oh, you're not cool, or oh, you weren't invited, you know, that kind of thing. So when I was invited, it was like, ugh, I'm so tired, I have to show up. But I have to show up so people know that I'm still around, and like people still know who I am. Like it was like one of those things. And you know, it did get to a point where, again, weed wasn't enough. Like weed wasn't getting me high. It was, you know, so I did try other things. I did try harder drugs that I completely, again, regret to this day. And luckily, at least with those, I was never addicted. And it was really like a once in a lifetime thing, genuinely, for me. And it was scary. And I'm saying it was scary because it is the stuff that you see in the movies when you're at a party and someone just whips out the white powder and everyone's doing it. So you're like, oh, it can't be that bad. And you don't think it's bad. Like you're surrounded by people who think that this is real life and this is normal. And then you start to believe that this is real life and this is normal. And, you know, one thing that I'm just so freaking thankful for, is that I did never get addicted to Coke, or that I did never do it more than one time on Team Kaylie, because it was like on one of my off weeks, but Coke is associated with skinny. Like it literally is just like, you know, I've seen the movies, I've seen it in real life, the modeling industry, you know, a lot of people who are addicted to that drug, you see how it affects their body. And but the eating disorder in me literally, you know, takes over my brain and says, all right, well, if you're doing Coke, then you're going to be skinny and you're not going to have an appetite and you're going to be focused, like hyper focused. And I'm very, very thankful, just very thankful that I never had access to it again after that night. And thank God I didn't have a bad experience with it as far as like, you know, life or death or anything, but it is scary how freaking accessible and common it is. And the fact that that thought used to cross my mind of like, well, maybe this wouldn't be so bad to just have a little phase of this, because then I'd lose so much weight and I'd never have to worry again. Like the fact that that was even in my head just goes to show, like, you know, how deep I was into, again, like I said, everything plays into everything, the eating disorder. And, you know, it was scary. It was scary that my mind went those places, that I was willing to try just about anything to feel anything. And that was a big part of it too, was, again, this will go into next week, but just that feeling of complete isolation and complete loneliness. Like it's scary what you're willing to do to just feel some sort of euphoria, even though it's temporary. And to feel like, okay, like this is like not real life right now. Like literally, I mean, you know, that's why people do drugs, because, you know, it makes colors brighter. It makes things move. Like, trust me, I freaking know. And it's terrifying to come back to real life. I literally remember thinking during that time too, like even with smoking weed and drinking, like whenever I would smoke, I literally would sit there and be like, how do I not smoke during the day? Like, how do I not smoke during Team Kaylie? Like, how do I do this sober? You know, and then I'd wake up and I'm sober, and of course, like, I'm like, of course, ready to work. But then you smoke again, and then you're like, how, like, you smoke and you look at people literally, like, I would just be like looking, you know, if I was walking to the gas station, I'm in the gas station, I'm just looking at these people like laughing and and I'm just like, how are they sober? Like, how are they not high right now? Like, that must suck. You know, like, that's where my head was at, because that's how deep in it I was. And it got to the point too where on Team Kaylie, I was just like wanting the day to just be fucking over so I could just go home and smoke, because I was like, I'm sick of being sober. Like, that's how bad it got. And it just manifested into this whole beast, you know, going crazy. I mean, I was wasted for 3 days at Coachella, like literally have like very vague memories. I tried a different drug at Coachella. I, you know, was terrified of what was, you know, happening to my body. And I showed up to set Monday, feeling alive. And then it kicked my ass and I couldn't go to set Tuesday because my body was like, what are the fuck are you doing to me? Like, literally, like, first of all, you're not feeding me. Now you're going to give me this random pill and, you know, like, you're not happy. You're not, whatever it is, you're not happy. And like, that was something too that I think I realized, you know, and that why I never got addicted to anything crazier than weed was because the calm down was so much worse. The after feeling was so much worse. And that's why people get addicted to that stuff, because they realize how much it sucks after. And it's not that life sucks. It's that your body is literally so overworked. It's released so much fake serotonin that you don't know what real life is anymore. You don't know what happiness is anymore. And no, like, nothing will satisfy you. And I think that's what people, luckily it scared me. It scared me out of it. And I was like, I never want to fucking do this ever again. Whereas, you know, it's not a fortunate situation like that for someone else. For someone else, it's like, I need to feel that all the time. And I've seen it happen to people I love. So even when I went to go see my psychiatrist for the first time, what's the first thing that she tried to freaking prescribe me? Xanax. And this isn't my therapist, by the way. This is a psychiatrist that I saw. This is why I say you got to go and test them out, because she tried to prescribe me Xanax. And at the time, I was close to someone who was addicted to Xanax. And I saw how Xanax was affecting her life and how it was affecting and bleeding over into my life. And it ruined our friendship. And, you know, thank God I had it in me to be like, no, I know how I am right now. I know where my brain's at. And if you prescribe this to me, you're giving me permission to do this shit every day. And it's not going to help me. It's going to become worse. And then I'm not going to be able to live without it. Then I'm going to be in this deep hole and I'm not going to know who I am and blah, 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 blah. It's like a whole spiral. And luckily I had it in me and I had the strength in me to say, no, I'm not being prescribed any medication. That's not why I came to see you. And so that's when I realized I needed a therapist and not a psychiatrist. And I'm just really, really freaking thankful that I didn't get into anything crazier. And, you know, it is what it is, and that I've learned. And I'm just very, very against hard drugs. Like, the biggest not advocate, whatever that would be called, against that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It's like every time we talk about it, you poor thing, it's like, this is literally your reaction every time, even just when we're talking every day-to-day basis.
It takes a minute to catch up with all the information, of course. And as a woman who has experienced similar things, as of, you know, trauma and eating disorder and addiction and million other toxic people that we'll talk about next week and how we dealt with that. So as a woman that I've already experienced that, like, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
So it resonates, of course, and that's how we are who we are, and that's how we have the friendship that we are, because we're able to be open to one another. And you've called me up and be like, oh my God, this and this and this and this happened, and I feel so upset by this, and vice versa. So usually, yeah, but the initial reaction is that, because you're like, okay, it's a lot to get, and it happens both ways. You're like, okay, whoa. And
it is. Even when I'm just talking, it's like, you know, it's a lot of, because I don't talk about it often outside of, you know, therapy. And my super, super close net of friends, like I don't talk about it often. And so when I find myself talking, you know, I go back into sometimes I can catch myself going into like my defensiveness, like, okay, I did this, but it's okay. Cause you know, and that's why it is important for me to like, just be honest, because I just, you know, again, like for someone who want to try these things and, you know, think like it's going to be a cool experience. Like it's just not, to me, it is not worth it. It is so not worth it, because I don't think people realize how freaking easy it is to lose yourself, even just after one time. It
Even
is
just
so
after one time, that's completely correct. That you need to have a really good support system, and if you already don't have it, like we discussed in the previous one, then just don't start. In that particular case, don't start, don't do it. It's not cool, it's not fun,
it's
and like you
only
said,
going
it's just it's
worse.
going to get worse. And like what you said was also very real. What happens with addiction is that the getting off that roller coaster is you smash your head so hard that you don't want to feel that anymore. And it goes with anything. Like I've drunk a bunch of times, and for fun, and then also a little bit for addiction. Not addiction precisely, but it's a whole different conversation for a different day. And and what ended up happening, like you remember the hangover, like you remember that feeling of being like, oh my god, I feel like the worst, like I can just die right now, like why
Literally.
would I live, like what's, you know.
Literally.
So the fact that you've one put yourself through that voluntarily, because I've been there as well, and two, then you're like, why would I ever do that again, is just
That's like the weird cycle of it. And like when you're anyone who's been hungover, which is like probably just like everyone, you know, who's had a drink before, everyone's felt a hangover, you know. It's what's the one thing everyone says when they're hungover? Oh, I'm never drinking again. Oh, you know, and then the hangover goes away and you're not feeling it anymore. And then you're like, oh, I want to be drunk. Like, it's just like a knowing that like, oh my God, yesterday I literally couldn't walk from the toilet to the bathroom, but wait, there's a party tonight and there's going to be alcohol and I like being drunk because to deal with real life, so I'm just gonna drink because that makes me feel happier in the moment. And then the next morning I'm hungover and I'm like, oh, I'm never drinking again, and then I'm back the next night.
exactly. So
like
we want you to avoid all those steps that we do not need. I mean, we don't need the whole population to go through those steps, more so
right.
to like really work on yourself and your inner self, and like go through therapy and like talk things out and vent things out.
Yeah, because there's a difference with, and that's something that too I want to like just clarify too. There's a difference with drinking and being an alcoholic, and you know, drinking to have fun. I drink now. Like I stopped drinking for a long time, but I drink now. Like, you know, especially on like my anniversaries with my girlfriend, or you know, going out with my girlfriends, like my girlies. You know, I do. I have a drink, and I can have a great time and be fine. And, you know, because I'm doing it to have a fun time. I'm not doing it because I'm suppressing so many different feelings that I don't want to feel. There's a complete difference with using these things. And this goes for weed too. There's a complete difference with smoking with your friends and chilling, having a good time, being high, or medically. I know a lot of people use marijuana medically, you know, using marijuana for your anxiety versus a coping mechanism to literally detach from real life. There's a huge difference. And at the time, that's where I crossed the line of like fun and social to, you know, it was a struggle that I had for a long time, even being able to differentiate feeling tipsy from feeling drunk, from being blacked out. I had fucked up my mentality so much that I wasn't drunk until I was blacked out. If I wasn't blacked out, then I wasn't drunk. And then it's like, oh, well, what's the point? And if I was tipsy, then it's like, okay, I don't want to be tipsy. If I'm drinking, I'm going to freaking black out because that's what I came here to do. I don't want to remember, you know, I don't want to think about what I have to do tomorrow. I don't want to think about how I can't eat tomorrow. Like, and that's where my head was. And it's really sad. Like, I literally had to learn and like rewire, like, I kid you not, I had to rewire my brain to be like, oh, you're drunk. You're a good you're a good drunk right now. Like, you're coherent, you're not embarrassing yourself, you're just loose and having a good time. You know, you're just chilling with your friends. Like, I had to rewire my brain. And there's still times where like I like won't think, and it's not in a bad way, but there's times where like I'll be like, I'm not even drunk, and they'll literally be like, Bree, you are drunk, and it's okay. And I'm just like, you know, I think too, I was embarrassed for so long of my bad habits and like of the way that people saw me. I mean, there are people out there who probably only know me as blacked out Bree. There are people who I've met who have been like, I've met you 3 times, and I've literally had to be like, did you meet me at a party? Because if you met me at a party, you didn't meet me. Like, that kind of thing. And so I literally like had to like, you know, just again train myself, like recognize too that like it's okay. Like I felt, because I did it in such an unhealthy, negative way, you know, I was so humiliated and embarrassed that I had to be like, okay, like it's okay. You can let loose and have fun sometimes. Like, don't let your past either. Like, don't hang on to all of that guilt. I would feel guilty sometimes. And no matter like, and I'm just so thankful to be in the place where I am now, and, you know, to be healthy and to have that awareness and to not have that guilt anymore. I don't care, which is the best feeling in the world. It's so liberating to not carry that guilt with me from Team Kaylie, from abusing these substances, and to be able to like live a happy, healthy life with an occasional margarita, you know? So I'm very, very thankful. Like, everything that I talk about has been a learning experience, and I wouldn't talk about it if I was still there. I wouldn't talk about it if it was something that I was still struggling with. And, you know, I'm just really, really thankful to be able to talk about it, because I know not everyone can.
I agree with the whole statement, that's for sure. To leave that guilt behind, to know where you stand, because I've gone through many different phases with drinking, and now I do drink, not often by any means, but I'm okay, and I've checked myself, and I've made sure I knew where I was and all these sorts of things. I feel like that's the most important thing. And like you said, you kind of left it behind because you shed that part, you overgrow that part, and you kept going. And that's one of the most important things as well, because you are allowed to go through every single phase, because you're a human being, period. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be upset, you can be happy. You don't have to be happy-go-lucky all the time. You don't have to look picture perfect all the time. There's no such thing. This is why on my personal behalf, I insist that feeds, that I insist that, you know, social media needs to be a little bit more, not even a little bit, a lot more realistic in what we see, so people understand the hardship behind it. I always mention, you can see it in my Insta stories, you see where I work, you see that I'm a sweaty mess for most of the time during summer, but you see me without makeup, you see me without, you know, any filter, actually. And I'm like, this is who I am. I show up being myself, and you show up being yourself. And I know this is why, as mentioned in the first episode, but knowing you personally, that these episodes were so important to you.
Yes.
That was kind of part of the question, which you kind of already did answer. Like, why is it important, and why do you want to open about it? So, because you kind of already answered that one, basically, what is your message? What do you want to say to those who are going through the same thing right now? Maybe because they don't have the right influence, maybe because they feel very stressed, maybe they're 13 or 43. It doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, it does, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are, what you're going through. Like, it doesn't matter. Or how long it's been, you know, which is something that you touched on last week that I thought was really important. It doesn't matter if it's been, you know, a month, if it's been 8 months. I've only been weed free for probably like a month and a half now. As far as just like, you know, not smoking anymore, I've completely got rid of all my, anything weed related is out of my house. I don't smoke, I don't do any of that, just because I know where it takes me, and it's just not for me. And, you know, I think my message throughout this whole thing is just going to be very similar every single week. And, you know, my famous 3 words that I just love is, it gets better. It does. You know, it starts with you. I can't stress that enough. It starts with you wanting that change. And I think that something that is so relevant to everything is self-love. As, you know, cliche or cheesy as everyone, you know, might say, blah, blah, blah. self-love is where it starts. And I'm not completely there. I'm not, completely full of that. Like, I still struggle with that. I think we all do. I think it's very human too. But to even just understand that it is human to struggle with that. But, me learning to treat my body like a temple, and to my body with love and not hurt her, in those ways, because I'm hurting myself. And, it's just so important to understand that everything is temporary. Like, no matter how dark, especially, like, again, I wasn't just in that dark place for 8 months. This is something that's manifested for a long time. This is something that overflowed after Team Kaylie. This is not just an 8-month process, and it gets dark, and it feels like I remember feeling like there is just nothing that is ever gonna, I remember thinking, how am I ever gonna look in the mirror and not want to, like, just take a fucking smash hammer to it or sledgehammer to it, And now I can wake up and look at myself in the mirror after a night of drinking and eating burritos all night and see that I'm bloated and be like, oh, that's okay. That's natural. Of course that's going to happen. Like, just learning to be kind to yourself, and just, like, even just the littlest ways. Something that I've learned from you is just, like, writing down little affirmations today. Like, just, I woke up and went for a hike. I didn't want to today, but I did it. Just, like, little things that I'm proud of myself for doing, and that are giving my body what she needs, in order to maintain the health and to maintain the mental health and everything. It's just really, really important to stress, that it does get better. Like, I can't stress it enough. For anyone who has reached out to me through DMs, and I've been able to see them and talk through whatever it is they're going through, they know that it gets better will always be in my message, because I know it seems like it won't. I just know it because I've been there, and I can't emphasize it enough that it does start with you, but it doesn't matter how long it takes. There is something to look forward to. It's not always going to be like this, because everything is temporary. Everything in this life is temporary.
Completely 110% agree with that. We talked about it again in the first episode about how I always said always believe, and that's what pushed me through, because there's always something better for you. There's always a way out. There's always a light. There's always someone you can talk to. You're not alone. There's enough people in this world. There's enough social media, for good or for bad, but use the good of the social media. Use platform like ours, because I also give a whole lot of resources every single month.
Yep.
It's a community, and much like you were saying with the DMs, like, I check everything, and I sometimes take a little too late, not too late, but a little too long, better said, and whatnot. But usually I try to get to each and every one of you, because that you're not alone. Do not ever think that you're alone. And what you said, even actually, we're human beings. We're not perfect. We have our internal struggles. Like, even right now, you might see Bryana with her followers and with her TV show on Netflix, and oh my gosh, she lives in LA, and oh my God, this life. She's more than just that. I'm more than just everything, a label that you can put on me, or just because I see and that's something, like, because I went through the happy-go-lucky phase, probably kind of like Kaylie herself at some point, of, like, having to be that person, because I was so distraught with myself internally that I always had to be the happy one, which was not true, and I self-harm a million ways. I abolished all that. I'm like, no, I want to tell people that this is how I am. And this is like a huge step, because it goes both ways. One, showing it to, like, my community, followers, etc., like the whole Always Believe or whatever platform I use, but also, and, like, being real and raw to, like, the public, like we say, because it's kind of scary. You're like, oh my God, like, because it's a big thing. But also goes a long way, because my friends, like, when I met my most recent friends, who are, like, my best friends now, of course, and whatnot, even within that, I was only telling them the happy stuff at the beginning.
Yep.
And I have to, like, break open. Like, even if I know these are really good people who mean the world to me, and I mean the world to them because they're, like, angels, like, I have to make sure that I open up. And that's something I learned recently. So it doesn't matter, like, what we talked about this for, like, as we wrap up this episode in particular. we talked about this in the first episode. Age is relative, and your journey is your journey.
Yes.
It takes however long it takes. You'll get there. It gets better. Always believe, of course. And it just goes to show you, because right now, Bryana and me, which with very different walks of life, but at the same time, many similar stories, we're sitting here in front of each other, not only as like doing this whole show and whatnot, of course, and like being able to broadcast it to all of you so you all get some sort of guidance, but also as friends. We've talked for a long time. I was again the whole thing, like the 3.5 hour conversation. Usually those are as long as it last, basically. But it's one of those things that the moment you do open up and the moment that you do reach out for help, amazing, wonderful things start to happen. But you're the first step.
Absolutely.
Okay. So for last, on your behalf, my darling, where can we find you, please?
At Bryana Salaz, BRYANA SALAZ. Throw that Y in there, add a little spice to my name.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. There you go. See? There you go. Add that spice, girl. Well, thanks to your parents, but still, love it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mom and Dad.
As always, thank you very much for always being there. Thank
Shout
you.
out.
Oh my goodness, that support system. I'll definitely link her down below, because why would I not? Obviously, so. But still.
Please, I'll beg you.
Exactly. It's always linked. Oh my goodness. So, of course, eating disorders and addiction didn't help you when you surround yourself with toxic people constantly. And that is what we're going to talk about next week, so we can see more of your journey and your strength of this behind Team Kaylie.
I feel like every time you bring what we're going to talk about next week, I always go, whew, because I'm just like, whew, what a heavy topic. And I'm like, oh, wait. Same thing every week. It's just one of those, like, dang.
Exactly. This is what Go to Fly's all about. This is not to tear you down. This, guys, is to bring you up. To say it does get better.
Absolutely.
Like, it does. We're not perfect, but it's okay. It's progression, not perfection.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us again this wonderful week of August, where we're all melting. But or not, I don't know. But still.
Felt that one.
Number here. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you very much. Bye.